Welcome back. As you know, I am Eli, the computer guy, here for the Daily Blob, where I shake my brain nipples every day to get some of that dirty YouTube money so I can afford to provide you folks in-person, hands-on technology education in Durham, North Carolina. So Silicon Dojo, silicondojo.com, we do classes about every 2 weeks. We're about to do a class on the OpenAI API. We only have one seat left. 45 seats were open, 44 are currently taken, so there is one seat left. Just so you know, you go to silicondojo.com to find out more about those classes. They are crowdfunded. There's a donor box link down below if you'd like to support that type of thing. And yeah, so the web went down today. Apparently, the web went down. It's kind of interesting, this whole, software as a service world, infrastructure as a service world. Back in the old days, they talked about with networking that it was 90% of the time it was a layer 1 issue. So there's something called the OSI model, layer 1 through layer 7, and layer 1 was the physical hardware. If you're wondering why the server was down, or the computer couldn't connect to the internet or whatever else, the first thing that you did was make sure that the damn network cable was actually plugged into the computer. I literally had to fly to an office one time just to plug in a network cable to the back of the computer. I was sitting on the phone with the people at the office that I was supporting, and again, they were states away, and I was like, look, okay, so the network cable is plugged in the back, right? Yes! Okay, do the ping. No, the ping failed. That failed. Okay, I guess it's a problem. I'll fly out. I flew out. The network cable was not plugged in the back of the computer. Users! If you ever wonder why I hate users, there are reasons. There's reasons I hate users, and there's reasons I hate node developers. I don't just come up with this stuff because I'm mean. I am mean, but there are reasons, right? Anyways, back in the days, it was always layer 1 issues. I think what's interesting in the modern world with the AAS infrastructure is it seems like if there's a problem, it's most likely a DNS issue. We saw this before with Facebook. So Facebook screwed up their BGP routing a few years ago, which wouldn't have normally been an issue, right? Basically, all of a sudden, everything, like almost all Facebook services went down, right? Facebook dropped, Instagram dropped, all this other stuff. It just didn't work, right? And it was weird. It was like this weird thing. Like, why would everything drop? If somebody put in the wrong configuration, why would everything drop? Because if you're looking at Facebook or Meta, right, there's lots of services going on. Redundant infrastructure, the entire thing. So, if pictures disappeared, or if, authentication disappeared, that would make sense. But why the fuck would everything drop? Well, apparently, when they fucked up their BGP configuration, they fucked up their BGP configuration for the network that contained their DNS servers. So they had all these beautiful DNS servers. They were connected, right? And so everything nowadays, nobody hard codes static IP addresses, so they all use DNS. And so when they screwed up the BGP routing for the DNS servers, none of the other services in Facebook's infrastructure could communicate with DNS. Ergo, they were not able to get to any resources, which was a hell of a thing. And it appears that is what happened with AWS early this morning, is that they mucked up their DNS. When in doubt, check your DNS servers. That might be a problem. So a lot of stuff went down, like a lot of stuff went down today. AWS services outages hits major websites, what we know so far as recovery begins. The other concern here when you're thinking about this, like in the modern world, they talk about us being at war, right? Eli, we're at war. And I guess we are now in Venezuela. We'll go back 2 months ago. Go back 2 months ago before we weren't in war with Venezuela. I'm not really sure how that works. Anyways, right? People say we're at war. Like, it doesn't seem like we're at war. It's like we're in cyber war. And what's curious with the whole cyber war thing is you think about like large attacks, right? You think about like war and technological infrastructure. Like, what happens if a missile hits a data center, right? What happens if these big events? What happens if somebody, cuts a fiber optic cable, cuts a lot of different fiber optic cable? What happens with our infrastructure? And I think what becomes interesting here is when you start looking at the weakest links in so much of our infrastructure, and you realize how weak some of those links are. Think about this, right? You don't have to take down fiber infrastructure. You don't have to nuke a data center. If you could just fuck DNS, think about this. Everything uses DNS. Most likely, even within your own internal infrastructure at this point, you're using DNS. So if you don't have your own DNS servers running, which a lot of people don't, if you're using somebody else's DNS servers and those DNS servers are connecting to other DNS servers, because DNS is its own architecture too. Like, think about this. If you just fuck up a little bit of the DNS infrastructure, how much crap could you take out? Apparently a lot. Amazon Web Services. And the other interesting thing with this too is, so like with Amazon, so they have regions. So one of the problems when you hear about people going down with Amazon is, so Amazon has multiple regions. There are times when regions go down, right? And Amazon tells you this. And so one of the things they tell you is that you should have redundancy across multiple regions. The idea is if one region fails, the other region is up and running, and you should have your systems automatically send users to the other region. And one of the problems is having multiple regions be redundant to each other costs extra money. Surprise, surprise, surprise. CEOs are like, well, I could either get an extra 10 feet on my new yacht, or I could have redundancy. And so they go for 10 feet on the new yacht. And so they only do one region, right? What is the likelihood an entire region is gonna go down? Well, it's not likely. I mean, well, it is likely. Anyways, right? So they don't. So a lot of times when you hear about problems with AWS and people complain about cloud infrastructure, the reality is these are known issues. These are known issues with known mitigation strategies. The companies just don't pay for the mitigation strategy, right? I think what's interesting here, if you start talking about like the DNS though, is could you have mitigated for this? Could you have mitigated for this, right? Anyways, AWS, a leader in cloud infrastructure market, reported a major outage on Monday, taking down numerous big-name websites. Many are now back online. The outage was first reported at midnight Pacific time in AWS main US East 1 region hosted in Northern Virginia. A notice on AWS status page said it was experiencing DNS problems with DynamoDB, its database service that underpins many other AWS applications, right? So you have DynamoDB, so it's a database engine. It's using DNS. DynamoDB underpins a lot of the other services, right? When you think about infrastructure as a service, when you go to AWS now, or you go to Azure now, and you look at all these services, right? The cool part is you don't have to think about how those services are built. You don't have to think about the operating system those services are running on. You don't have to think about all the other stuff, right? But they are running on something. They are running something. And the thing that those things are running on, they require services too. So, but what they're saying here is DynamoDB underpins many of the services that these clients were using. DynamoDB had a problem with DNS. All of a sudden, DynamoDB no longer works, and everything else kind of falls apart. Which again, the interesting question here, that this failed, whatever, shit fails, right? Whatever. The curious thing with this is, could this have been mitigated, right? Again, if an entire region fails, but if the DNS services on a service that you require fail, is that a mitigatable thing? I don't know. AWS cited an operational issue affecting multiple services and said it was working on multiple parallel paths to accelerate recovery. In an update at 2:01, so 2 hours later, more than 70 of its own services were affected. So 70 AWS services were affected. Shortly afterward, AWS said it was seeing significant signs of recovery. By 3:35, the issue had been fully mitigated, AWS said in an update, adding that most AWS service operations are succeeding normally now. Quote, some requests may be throttled while we work toward full resolution, it said, noting that some services were continuing to work through a backlog. That's the other interesting thing too. So it's been fully mitigated. But one of the things with how systems can work, right? You can have basically how do you put a polling mechanism or whatever? Basically, I talked about it before, like you can have a processing scheme. So basically, what's supposed to happen is as a request comes in, the request gets fulfilled. As a request comes in, the request gets fulfilled. You can have a buffer. So a request comes in, it's taking a second for that to be fulfilled. A new request comes in, and then it just gets saved until the first one gets fulfilled, right? And that's why you can have a bit of a buffer. Here's an interesting thing. What happens when the entire system fails? How big can that buffer be? When can AWS be technically correct and you're still screwed, right? So this service is now functioning. This service is now responding to requests again. But the buffer, the buffer that has been created is like a 2-hour buffer, right? One of those things to kind of be pondering. It's also one of the things, like if you're trying to deal with the after effects of one of these failures, one of the things you might want to do is just drink a cup of coffee, right? Sometimes it's best not to tell the executive that Amazon is back up and running, because if you tell your executives, okay, Amazon had a problem, Amazon is now back up and running, we're going to fix it. Right? Well, at the point that you tell your executives that Amazon is back up and running, everything past that point is your fault. Right? Everything before that is Amazon's fault. Everything past that is your fault. So one of the things you might want to do is when you find out that Amazon is back up and running, you go have a cup of coffee for like an hour. Go to the whiteboard. Go to the whiteboard. Look, boss. We're planning our recovery strategy. So when you go to the whiteboard and you're drinking your cup of coffee and you're fucking off for about an hour, one of the things you can do there is you're waiting for everything to replicate out. You're waiting for everything to kind of balance out, the buffers get flushed, the whole 9 yards, so that when you sit down to actually do your work, you're dealing with your problems. You're not dealing with some kind of backlog issues in the system. There's nothing worse than pulling out the little hair you have left, not understanding why your code or whatever doesn't work. And it's not a problem with your code. It's a problem with their system have not fully recovered yet, so things are not working properly. The website Down Detector said that the user reports indicated problems at sites including Amazon, Disney, Lyft, McDonald's, New York Times, Reddit, Ring, Robinhood, Snapchat, T-Mobile, United Airlines, Venmo, and Verizon. British government websites gov.uk and HM Revenue and Customs were also experiencing issues. Lloyds Banking Group confirmed that some of its services were affected and asked customers to bear with us as it was while it worked to restore them. Reddit too, working on scaling Reddit back to 100%. Some United and Delta customers reported on social media that they couldn't find their reservations. Can you imagine trying to get to get your reservations for a flight and you can't get access to those? Other social media users cited disruptions across cloud-based games, including Roblox and Fortnite, while crypto exchange Coinbase said many users were unable to access service due to the outage. Think about that too, like with Coinbase. This is kind of interesting with Coinbase, and you think about things like regulations. What happens if something was happening in the crypto markets, right? Since it's an investment. Sure, fine, whatever. Since Bitcoin is an investment, right? It is kind of an interesting question here. Like, what happens if something major was going on in the crypto markets and then Coinbase drops because of a DNS issue and DynamoDB for AWS? Graphic design tool Canva said it was experiencing significant increased error rates that are impacting functionality. Generative AI search tool Perplexity was also affected. The root cause is an AWS issue. We're working on resolving it. Quote, there's no sign that this AWS outage was caused by a cyber attack. It looks like a technical fault affecting one of Amazon's main data centers. Something to be thinking about in this modern world. What happens when fat fingering something doesn't just crash your systems, it crashes everybody's systems, right? I've talked about that before. I had a buddy of mine. She had been working 100-hour work weeks, right? For a number of months as they were doing this massive migration. One of the reasons why you don't want to do 100-hour work weeks. Here's something I just want you to all to understand. When you hear these dipshit founders and tech CEOs talk about how Americans, if you want to compete in the tech world, you need to do this 996 garbage. It's garbage. Let me explain why. I had a buddy of mine. Anyways, the company I was working for, we had our main CRM, so customer relationship management servers, and so we had our custom. And this was over 20 years ago, so we had our own custom solution for CRM. Anyway, so they're migrating the new fancy database server. So it was a Unix, back when we still used Unix, it was a Unix server. And so the final thing that she needed to do was wipe the old server. So I forget, it was like the new server was called Jupiter and the old server was called Saturn. And we use planets for some reason for our servers. Anyways, and so she even said, she was like, I typed in the command to wipe out the new server because she was just so tired. It's like Saturn, Jupiter, Saturn. And she'd been doing all these commands on Jupiter. So she'd been doing all these commands on Jupiter. And so Jupiter was just in her brain. But Jupiter was the new server. So she typed in the command she was supposed to wipe the old server. In her brain, it had gotten logged in the new server's name. So it was like wipe, and then she put in Jupiter. And the worst part is, she said it failed out. She fucked up the command. She fucked up the command to wipe the server. And they're just like, oh, fuck. She didn't do the right thing. And then, so she retyped the command properly to wipe the new server. And it was Unix, so it happened that quick. She literally hit enter and literally realized she had wiped the server that they've been migrating to for a week. Oh my God. Yeah, that was fun. That was a disaster for the entire company for a couple of weeks. They got that shit back up and running. The worst part was she wasn't fired. You know the worst fucking part? She wasn't fired because the manager realized that that she had been working over 100-hour weeks for multiple weeks in a row. And she was a very good Unix administrator that just made a very stupid mistake. Anyways, I bring that up because it is kind of an interesting question. In this modern world, how many points of failure are there where somebody working a 100-hour week could wipe out something, change something that now could affect not just simply a single company, but every company, right? The BGP configuration. So apparently it was one person that fucked up the BGP configuration for Facebook. And the thing with the BGP configuration, so most of the time what's supposed to happen is if a bad configuration goes out for your networking equipment, you can remote into it in order to change the configurations. It sucks, right? So you got your data department somewhere. Somebody puts out a bad configuration. Oh, that's a bad configuration. Okay, worst case scenario, right? You go to your terminal, you terminal in, or however they do it with their Cisco equipment nowadays, you terminal in and you fix the configuration, right? So your data department will be very pissed with you, but it's solvable. That's why you have more staff than you necessarily need on a given day. The issue was with the BGP, when they fucked up the BGP and the DNS and all that, they could no longer remote in to the networking equipment to make the changes. So one of the reasons that Facebook got so screwed is apparently they had to send Datacom people on site to be able to connect to their networking equipment on site to be able to do the configurations. Not only it was a bad BGP that went out that blocked off connection, so DNS could no longer be resolved, and when they tried to remote in, it just screwed up the networking, so they couldn't even remote in to change the networking configurations, right? And you think about that, and you think about my buddy, and it's like, that's an interesting question. Like, how many points of failure are there in our systems where there's just one person, and as long as they plug in the configurations properly, everything's fine. But if they do something wrong, everything goes to hell. And the other thing to be thinking about, right? So we did the fireside chat. We did the fireside chat with Kyle Hansloven, CEO of Huntress, right? They're a $2 billion cybersecurity company. And we were talking about the fact that they have no communication with the government over things like counterintelligence. Right? I've talked about this before, counterintelligence, right? So intelligence operatives being inserted into government positions or into private positions so that they can either learn things or cause problems. How hard would it be to get somebody, right, with, either they are paid to do nefarious things or they want to do nefarious things for whatever reason. How hard would it be to get them into a position where a single screwed up line of code or a single screwed up command could take out a whole bunch of shit? I don't know. It's one of those things to ponder, and that's why I get a little concerned about our current security policy in the United States. Everybody we knows we're in a cyber war with China, and yet nobody seems to be doing a whole hell of a lot about it. Anyways, it looks like a technical fault. Rob Jardin, Chief Digital Officer at cybersecurity company NIM VPN, said in a statement, quote, "These issues can happen when systems become overloaded or a key part of the network goes down. And because so many websites and apps rely on AWS, the impact spreads quickly." So there you go. AWS outage. Appears to be DNS. It appears to be DNS. What do you think about this? What do you think about how important DNS is now in this, as a service world? What do you think about this? Where one service, right, this DynamoDB needs DNS. When it crashes, it takes down 70 other services. And then think about all the companies that are built, right, on those 70 other services. How does this make you feel? What do you think about the fact that there seems to be no nation state policy that we have in regards to this type of thing, right? When we had utilities, right? When we had electric, right? The electric grid, when we have water supply, when we have gas, back when we had landline telephones, right? There was a tremendous amount of national policy about how this stuff needed to be managed, maintained, uptime, that type of thing. What do you think about with like AWS or Azure or any of these types of things, right? This is critical infrastructure for our country that, basically seems to be run on a wing and a prayer half the time. What do you think about that? Do you think anybody is going to risk jail time? And think about that. Like when I talk about this, I know it sounds like hee ha ha. So whoever fat fingered this, somebody fat fingered this. What do you think about the fact that jail time will never come up? Like jail time is not even something that would come up in the conversation. Does that make you feel comfortable? Does somebody fat fingering something shutting down a whole bunch of businesses and it's just gonna get swept on the rug? Maybe some people are gonna get some credits to their AWS accounts, and that's about it. And then what does that mean for the future, right? I don't know. Put your thoughts down below. If you like these videos, give us a thumbs up. If you hate these videos, give us a thumbs down. Call me amazing. Call me a moron. Just be a real nutneck and do it down there in the comment section. Do remember silicondojo.com? Silicon Dojo is what I actually care about. We're having our next class on Wednesday. We're going to be having another class a couple Wednesdays from that, so on and so forth. In-person hands-on technology education that is free to the end user. Free to the end user isn't free. There is a donor box link down below if you would like to support the projects that I do. And with that, see y'all later.